Welcome to the Yakima Valley College Writing Center's Punctuation Patterns video. Let's start off by discussing the period. Basically, use a period at the end of a sentence. Okay, how do I know if something is a sentence, you say? Well, look for an independent clause. All sentences must contain at least one independent clause. An independent clause can also be called a simple sentence, a complete sentence, or a main clause. There are many different names, but they all refer to the same thing. So, you might be asking yourself, what is an independent clause? Well, it's a clause for starters. A clause is a subject and a verb. The subject tells us who or what is doing the action, and the verb tells us what the action is. In our example here, Jennifer loves science fiction movies. Jennifer is the subject. She's the one doing the action. And loves is the verb. Loves is the action. So we put those two together, and we have the independent clause, Jennifer loves. Now we have some extra words, science fiction movies, that give some information about what Jennifer loves. But grammatically, the heart of this clause is Jennifer loves. That alone could be a sentence. Now, not all clauses are independent. Not all clauses can function as a complete sentence on their own. Some clauses are dependent. A dependent clause is a group of words that might look like a sentence, but isn't. Here's an example. Because she loves science fiction movies. This is a clause because it has a subject, she, and a verb, loves, but it doesn't really give us a complete thought. It leaves us asking, what happens? Does she skip out on classes? Does she cosplay at conventions? Does she own every sci-fi movie ever made? The thought is incomplete. To complete it, we'd need a different independent clause. The answer to what happens is sometimes already written as an independent clause just before or after the dependent clause. Here's an example. Jennifer goes to Comic-Con every year, period, because she loves science fiction movies, period. So here we have the independent clause preceding the dependent clause. But that period between the two leaves the dependent clause hanging as a sentence fragment. In the next example, we have the dependent clause first, followed by the independent clause after. Because she loves science fiction movies, period. Jennifer goes to Comic-Con every year, period. Again, we have a period separating the dependent clause from the independent and making that dependent clause a sentence fragment. So complete the idea presented in the dependent clause by attaching it to the independent clause. Here are two ways we fixed it. We have, in the first example, the independent clause first, followed by the dependent clause, with no punctuation in between. Jennifer goes to Comic-Con every year because she loves science fiction movies. The next example, we have the dependent clause first, followed by the independent clause, and the two are separated only by a comma, not a period. Because she loves science fiction movies, comma, Jennifer goes to Comic-Con every year. If you're trying to decide whether or not a clause is dependent, look for a dependent word before the subject. Here are some examples of dependent words. After, although, because, before, the phrase even though, if, since, when, wherever, while, until, or unless. And there are many more, but if you see one of these words or phrases in front of the subject of a clause, that means the clause is dependent. And simply attaching one of these words to the beginning of an independent clause will change it to a dependent clause. So watch out for these words. Now that we have independent clauses and dependent clauses sorted out, and we know not to separate the two with a period, let's review the proper use of a period. Use it at the end of a sentence. A sentence can be just an independent clause, like this, Jennifer reads, period. A sentence can also be a combination of independent and dependent clauses, like this, Jennifer watches YouTube whenever she has a break at work, period. And a sentence can even be multiple independent clauses, if you join them correctly. For example, Jennifer really wanted to attend Comic-Con this year, and she even bought tickets early, but she got the flu and couldn't go. Period. Now it's time for a quiz. Which of the passages below uses periods correctly? A. Lola runs. Period. B. I am going to Disneyland. Period. After I graduate. Period. C. Before the bodybuilder posted a selfie on Instagram, comma, he pumped some iron so he'd look as ripped as possible. D. Since Javier moved to Hong Kong to study Chinese in March, comma, he couldn't attend his friend's wedding in April. Period. E. I work at night, semicolon. I sleep during the day. Period. Please pause the video and choose your answers. Okay, what did you say? Here are the answers. A. Lola runs. Period. This is an independent clause correctly ended with a period, so it's correct. B. I am going to Disneyland. Period. After I graduate. Period. Now this is incorrect because the period after I am going to Disneyland separates off the dependent clause after I graduate, so it's sitting there all alone as a sentence fragment. So that period between I am going to Disneyland and after I graduate needs to go. C. Before the bodybuilder posted a selfie on Instagram, comma, he pumped some iron so he'd look as ripped as possible. Now, this is incorrect because there is no period at the end of this sentence. D. Since Javier moved to Hong Kong to study Chinese in March, comma, he couldn't attend his friend's wedding in April, period. Here we have a dependent clause and then an independent clause separated by a comma, and the whole sentence is capped correctly with a period. Next we have E. I work at night, semicolon. I sleep during the day, period. Here we have two independent clauses linked together with a semicolon and correctly ended with a period. So you might be wondering about that semicolon. A semicolon can join two independent clauses that are related. Here's an example. Jennifer loves movies about space. Her favorite movies always have aliens. These sentences are both independent clauses, of course, and they're both related to what sort of films Jennifer likes. So we can join them together with a semicolon. Jennifer loves movies about space, semicolon. Her favorite movies always have aliens. So a semicolon can also join together two independent clauses with a transition word or phrase. Now, a transition word or phrase is something like accordingly, furthermore, similarly, at any rate. In other words, in the first place, meanwhile, on the other hand, likewise, furthermore, etc. So we can take our two sentences from the previous example, Jennifer loves movies about space, and her favorite movies always have aliens, and join them together like this. Jennifer loves movies about space, semicolon. In fact, comma, her favorite movies always have aliens. Now, when you join together two independent clauses with a semicolon and a transitional word or phrase, also use a comma after the transitional word or phrase. The semicolon doesn't just join two independent clauses. You can also use a semicolon between items in a series that have internal punctuation. Here's an example. My sci-fi favorites include Star Trek, comma, with Captain Kirk, comma, Dr. McCoy, comma, and Mr. Spock, semicolon. Star Wars, comma, with Han Solo, comma, Luke Skywalker, comma, and Darth Vader, semicolon. And Serenity, comma, with Captain Reynolds, comma, Zoe, comma, and River. Each item in this series is filled with commas. If we were to use commas to separate each item, then it would be very hard to tell where each item began and ended. So instead we use semicolons between the items to clarify things. Now let's talk about the colon. Use a colon after an independent clause to direct attention to a list, an appositive, or a quote. Now, in each of these uses, a colon is basically saying that what comes after it makes sense of what comes before. Let's see how that works. Let's start with a list. Jennifer likes watching many different genres of movies, colon, science fiction, anime, horror, suspense, documentaries, and drama. So that list of genres explains the different genres of movies that Jennifer likes. Now let's look at an appositive, which is just a sort of renaming. Jennifer was watching her favorite movie of all time, Serenity. Now, Serenity renames favorite movie of all time and makes sense of that phrase. Next we have a quote. Captain Reynolds voices the credo of the charismatic renegade, I aim to misbehave. Now, we don't know what the credo of the charismatic renegade is until it's explained for us. I aim to misbehave. So there you go. What comes after a colon makes sense of whatever comes before. Moving on, let's talk about commas and coordinating conjunctions. Use a comma and a coordinating conjunction, or a connector, to link ideas of equal importance. Basically, you can pair up two independent clauses using a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Now, there are 7 of these coordinating conjunctions in the English language, and they are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. There's an easy way to remember these. Use the acronym FANBOYS. F for, A for and, N for nor, B for but, O for or, Y for yet, and S for so. Of course, these conjunctions show different relationships between the independent clauses they link. And shows addition, for and so show cause and effect, nor and or show choice, and but and yet show contrast. Here are some examples of commas and coordinating conjunctions linking together independent clauses. Jennifer goes to as many sci-fi movies as she can, and she buys her favorite ones on Blu-ray. She really likes the sci-fi movies of the 60s, but the older movies are very difficult to find. She either hunts down older films at conventions, or she buys them from collectors on eBay. Of course, sometimes you use a coordinating conjunction just to link 2 words within a single clause. And then it's not linking 2 independent clauses, so you don't need a comma. It's just another word in the sentence. For example, Jennifer likes sci-fi and horror movies. Now here, we're just linking together sci-fi and horror, so no comma is necessary. Or Matthew walks quickly but carefully past the graveyard. We're just linking together quickly and carefully, not 2 independent clauses. So again, no comma is necessary. We can also use commas to offset non-essential information. These phrases are informative but not critical to the meaning of a sentence. For example, Matthew, his heart beating wildly, walked as quickly as he could past the graveyard. Now, his heart beating wildly isn't essential to the meaning of the sentence, but it does spice things up. We could just say, Matthew walked as quickly as he could past the graveyard, but when we insert that extra bit to spice things up, we offset it with commas. In another example, we have Angela, a good friend of mine, just got a job promotion. Now, we could just say Angela just got a job promotion, but maybe we need to clarify who Angela is so we understand why we're talking about her. In that case, we can insert a good friend of mine and offset that with commas. Commas are also useful for separating introductory words and phrases from the rest of the sentence. For example, hey, we are late for class. Or, yes, I heard your question. Or, looking poised and calm, Jade walked into class. Or, exhausted after the 5-mile climb, the hikers took a break. So, whenever you have an introductory word or phrase coming at the beginning of a sentence, you can separate it off from the main sentence with a comma. Commas are also necessary when writing dialogue and introducing quotations. For example, Matthew said, I wish I would have taken a different route home. Or, I wish I would have taken a different route home, Matthew commented. Here's another example. I wish, Matthew whispered, I would have taken a different route home. One important thing to note is that when a comma comes before a quotation or piece of dialogue, it is outside the quotation marks. But when it comes at the end of a quotation or piece of dialogue, it is inside the quotation marks.
Commas also come into play when you're writing out geographical names, dates, addresses, and titles. Let's start with geographical names first. I am glad to live in Yakima, Washington, for its fresh fruit and produce. Here we have a city and state pair, and the state is offset from the rest of the sentence using commas. If we had a state and country, like Washington and the United States, we would offset the country using commas. Washington, the United States, and so on. Next, let's look at dates. Fall quarter began on September 23rd, 2019, and will end December 11th, 2019. When you're writing out dates in your text, month, day, and year, offset the year with commas. Let's look at addresses next. Please send the package to 708 Spring Street, Yakima, Washington, 98902. There is a comma after every item except the state. There is no comma in between the state and the zip code. Lastly, let's take a look at titles. Here we have Joy Pfizer, PhD, was elected to the school board. When a title follows a name, the title is offset using commas.
Another great use of commas is listing. Whenever you're listing 3 or more things or actions in a sentence, separate them using commas. For example, Jennifer likes watching comedy, suspense, drama, horror, and science fiction movies. Also, Jennifer attends Comic-Con every year, writes fan letters to her favorite actors, and keeps her fan blog updated every day. Now, in both of these lists, there is a comma before the last item. Some people leave that comma out, but others prefer that it be included. Check with your style guide and your instructor to see if that comma is preferred. Also, when you're listing actions, make sure that the verbs match. Attends, writes, and keeps are all in the same tense and person. So make sure that your verbs in a list have that sort of parallelism, that they match. Last but not least, don't forget, punctuation can save a life. Take a look at this. I like cooking my family and my pets. Don't be a psycho. Use punctuation. See how it changes things? I like cooking my family and my pets. Thank you for watching our video. I hope it was helpful. Good luck punctuating your sentences.
Non-discrimination notice from Yakima Valley College. Yakima Valley College does not discriminate against any person on the basis of race, color, national origin, disability, sex, genetic information, or age in admission, treatment, or participation in its programs, services, and activities, or in employment. All inquiries regarding compliance should be directed to the Executive Director of Human Resource Services, YVC, South 16th Avenue and Nob Hill Boulevard, Yakima, Washington 98902, or call 509-574-4670.